Hello, and welcome to the second week of the Josiah Media Festival workshops. Last week's workshop was fantastic. We screened the best local student films between 2006 and 2019. This week's workshop features two professionals from San Antonio who are active in both the local and national film industry. Adam Dusenbury is the owner of White Cloud Drone Services. Not only must he be an excellent cameraman, but he must have a certified drone pilot certification and be a master mechanic, because drones crash and you have to make your repairs in the field and get that thing back up in the air. We also have Sergio Guerra from The Darkness, a makeup shop here in San Antonio known internationally that specializes in fantasy, sci-fi, and horror makeup.
Hello, my name is Adam Dusenbury, and I'm the CEO and founder of White Cloud Drones. I certainly appreciate you guys inviting me here today and present to you virtually through whatever means you guys are watching this on. But really want to kind of briefly discuss with you on how I got into drone photography and a little bit about how our company has gotten to where it is through not just these crazy days today, but also for the past 10 years. I really got into drone photography 10 years ago when drones became really an essential piece to all things photo and video. And as photography and videography was a huge passion of mine to provide not just clients an artistic view, but also an educational view, I felt that drones was something that, one, I could afford, and two, they were becoming more reliable and more accessible to everyday users such as myself. So I really got into drone photography with the intention to help educate engineers and architects and preservationists the historical imagery of what cities and urban developments really are, or actually were coming to become. So being able to document the city of San Antonio in 2010 and then compare that in 2030 or even 2050 is something that I kind of found a lot of value in. Really what I was doing before drones was doing everything on an educational stance. So ironically, what we're doing right now, a virtual lesson or a virtual workshop, is exactly what I was passionate about 20 years ago, and trying to be able to find some form or fashion to teach people through imagery, through photos, through videos. And then of course that kind of spiraled into where people were starting to pay me for weddings and for magazine shoots and for small advertisements. And of course, adding drones to that only helped sharpen my skill set and set me differently and better from everyone else. And then of course, drone photography over the past few months, this past year, dealing with COVID-19 and the quarantine and the lockdowns, being able to provide something from a distance to the point where it's contactless is something that was really helpful for us. Because that's already what we've already been doing, is providing a contactless social distance type product. We could literally go to construction sites or to specific properties and shoot when no one was around and still be able to get the actual content, the footage that people were looking to have. So ironically, our aerial services has drastically increased over the past few months because it is a product and service that meets all of the CDC guidelines. And then of course, the privacy issues that a lot of people have always been concerned about. Some of you may have actually gotten some sort of flyer or mailer, or even like a spammy email saying that, hey, we took photos of your roof or took photos of your property. We'd love to help you out by letting you know that you have issues with your roof or your property. Ironically, this is actually legal, and people can literally fly over your house and take photos of your backyard and roof. Unfortunately, until the laws catch up to the drone laws, we're somewhat bound by these parameters. However, there are a lot of different laws that restrict people from flying over very sensitive areas, such as military installations and government buildings, and highly sensitive structures like power grid plants. But again, the laws are still somewhat archaic. They're getting better, but they're getting better as more consumer drones and all drones are becoming commercialized. So hopefully today's presentation I will give you a little bit more insight about not just the robust variety of what drones can do and can provide to everyday users, but also for the future. I started this business with the intent knowing that this specific product of technology is going to be around for a long time. My company, White Cloud Drones, was founded 4 years ago here in San Antonio, and we exist solely because of this kind of technology and how it has evolved over the years. Hopefully, after this presentation, you'll know a little more about the evolution of technology that has changed the way our militaries operate, our governments decide their actions, as well as how the rest of us can benefit from the many everyday uses drones can provide. Ever since flight took place back in the early 1900s, people have been inventing and adapting specific kinds of technology to accessorize these things we call planes or aerial vehicles. In the beginning of World War I, governments and their militaries quickly saw a strategical maneuver to get an advantage on their enemies. During that time, hot air balloons, airplanes, and any other device that could fly was mounted with a camera. At that time, cameras and lens technology was put to the test. There was a growing need to develop better cameras with better lenses, pilots, and operators skilled enough to use them. You can imagine what the US military would do when flying over enemy territory with a camera. They were providing aerial reconnaissance, reporting back exactly where the enemy is, what they are doing, where they're moving, and even what kind of equipment they had. This kind of technology was a huge leap from modern warfare at that time. Having a bird's eye view of exactly where your enemy was and what they're doing, well, it's just a huge, huge advantage. At that time, Germany was the forefront of better technology. Carl Zeiss, which some of you may know as a brand of camera lens glass, was recruited by the German military to develop a specialized camera with a specialized lens for airplanes to fly much higher than most and could be able to capture very good photographs. It was the Germans who developed a growing need of aerial reconnaissance that propelled the rest of the world to keep up. As you can see in this picture on the left, these were the cameras that were strapped to German planes. And if it wasn't for the French and British troops shooting this plane down and capturing this kind of technology and learning how to develop it on their own, there would be a much different outcome than how the war ended. In any phase of technology development, we are always eager to test the technology first without having a person be at that risk. You can imagine 80 to 90 years ago, airplanes were still in their infancy stages of being perfected and designed. So being able to fly a device without a person being transported within it and still be able to remote control that device to do what it's intended to do was still very far away technology, but people had the idea of developing it and developing a lot of it. World War II and the Korean War back in the 40s and 50s, technology was greatly advanced. The superpower militaries in the world have invested a great deal of money, time, and resources to ensure that the safety of their country and their allies was at the forefront. Technology was advancing fast in all sectors. Cameras were better, radar was invented, film and motion pictures are becoming more abundant. And of course, the technology to be able to use this was being widely associated with military strategical development. However, two big obstacles still remained in developing a more strategical upper hand on this technology: controlling the devices remotely and accurately, as well as the amount of flight time these devices could be flown. So by the 1960s and 1970s, America has embraced this explosion of technological advancement. Every airplane had some form of camera taking photos of the ground. Commercial airliners had cameras mounted on their bellies, taking photos of everything that was below them. Even these passenger transported airliners that were flying from America to Europe or even to Asia or anywhere in the world were taking photos of everything below them. They were, in essence, much like Google Maps is today, mapping the world in real time. These photos that you see here are aerial photos taken of San Antonio highway construction development in the 1960s. This gave local and state and even federal governments the ability to archive the construction progress and urban development taking place. Architects, engineers, and preservationists of the future will be able to access these historical documents for assessing and preparing for future upgrades, which we're all experiencing now. We don't know where to go if we don't know where we've been. Documenting historical events is the only way future generations will be able to make a more informed decision on how we can advance our society. Ever since the invention of photography and the airplane or aerial vehicles, we have been able to better understand how to plan for our society's future. By the 1970s and 1980s, all of this cool technology that the military had been using has now been commercialized. The patents and the innovative developments by the military had not been released for private companies to develop their own version of these kinds of applications yet. Now they are. You see, with these helicopters, that those cameras are providing several different types of aerial services. Photography for one, film, cinematography for filmmakers and TV newscasters. They're providing surveillance for law enforcement and military, and they can even be tracking the construction of the urban development that we previously just talked about. As with any technology demand, there's always an improvement. Cameras are becoming more specialized. The demand for higher resolution and more accurate detail advanced the technology in cameras and the operators that use them. Getting the best shot was always at the forefront of film producers and TV broadcasters. This equipment was so expensive back in the 1980s, when there is this growing need of aerial photography and videography, that only the big Hollywood blockbuster productions could afford them. Ironically, the most expensive part was the operator themselves. The operators were highly skilled and highly trained pilots, as well as camera operators. Being able to provide both of these types of skills was a rarity and in very high demand. It was only a matter of time when people started to develop a more reliable, affordable, and accessible form of aerial photo and video to companies that didn't have these large Hollywood blockbuster budgets. The evolution of drones, or UAVs, or UAS even, has quickly developed, as we've already discussed. Unmanned aerial vehicle simply means that it is an aerial vehicle that doesn't have a person designed to be operating it from within. The military has been designing remote controlled long endurance flight operations of drones since the 1960s and 1970s. The evolution of turbine engines and electrical engines and the communication link for remote controlling these devices has been vastly improved over time. There's been even plans to get to the moon and set up communication stations to ensure the safety of our militaries around the world. When the US began to heavily monopolize the space exploration and satellite development, they quickly realized that these orbiting devices quickly became communication stations for future remote controlled machines, such as drones. And in the 1980s and 1990s, the US military put a ton of money in the research and development, again, of improving these drones for military and strategical advancement. Drones that are able to provide all of the necessary data and information, much like what the militaries were doing 100 years ago, providing accurate reconnaissance to help militaries formulate a better plan of action. These drones you see here is relatively current development of what these drones look like and how they operate. With technology taking us outside of the realm of Earth and having our communication links with satellites and other types of technology has greatly improved the ability to control these devices very accurately for a very long period of time and have them do very specific missions. Some of them are designed to only do specific efforts. Those efforts may include taking photos and videos of our adversaries. Some of them may be designed to drop bombs or shoot missiles or interfere with communication technologies. There are a number of efforts that these drones do to help keep our country and soldiers safe. In fact, I have two very close friends that were in the military doing all of these things. One friend was an Air Force pilot that flew F-15s, providing reconnaissance over China and other Asian countries. As he was retiring, they restationed him to be a drone pilot. As a drone pilot, he remotely controlled a drone that would fly 5,000 miles away from where he was for hours at a time, taking photos and videos of our foreign adversaries to ensure that they were not planning on doing anything that we felt would be destructive to the neighboring countries or to ourselves. Another friend of mine flew drones for the Navy SEAL teams, giving them a bird's eye view on highly specialized missions. He was also tasked with disrupting communication links with our foreign adversaries' drones. He knew how to hack into the communication links that other countries were using to fly their drones. For all of you who know how to code or want to learn how to code and are very savvy with technology and have a great need in this kind of robotic technology, I'm excited for you, as the future will entail a great deal of people with this kind of interest and skill set as the military and consumers develop drone-based technology. As with any technological developments in the military, that technology, or at least a version of it, becomes commercialized. This is a toy drone from the 1990s. It's simply a remote-controlled helicopter. It was something that sparked my interest when I was 12 years old. I begged and begged my parents to buy this toy helicopter. They never bought it for me because, one, it was expensive, and two, it was very easy to break and to repair. My parents feared that as soon as I want to have something like this, I would break it within days, which most boys my age and probably even your age still do. They felt that they wait until I was a little older and could afford it on my own, then allow me to choose whether or not to get it. A major barrier for these products back in the 1990s was simply the fact that the reliability, the safety, the durability, and even of course the affordability was simply not practical. Only hobbyists and enthusiasts with a lot of money could afford these kinds of things at that time. But all it takes is just a few people who are determined to make it a lucrative business model. In the early 2000s, cell phones were becoming more abundant, Wi-Fi technology is evolving, and the ability to remote control devices, even with Bluetooth technology, was greatly advancing. By 2010, quadcopters, as you see on the right, came available to everyday consumers. They connected to satellites, which gave them accurate geographical location, or GPS. You can strap a small and light action camera, such as a GoPro, which had just come out just a few years before. Battery life would allow the drone to fly between 10 to 15 minutes at a time. And without having to worry about the constant motion of airplane flight, these quadcopters allow the drone to stay stationary, like an aerial tripod. This changed a lot in how photographers and videographers, a lot of other industries, put a value to their own art and skill. First on the scene in the early 2000s was that film directors and producers quickly saw an artful skill to be fully monopolized and capitalized on. Using drones, they could get shots that would help give the audience a more unique, realistic perspective. As mentioned before, helicopter pilots that could operate in very risky positions and still have an operator control the camera was a rarity. Well, the rarity for operating a drone in the same kind of fashion was also in high demand. The growing need of having drones carry a camera provide a more affordable and reliable way of getting the shots they needed was something that was blowing everyone's minds. Since YouTube and online video streaming became more of a necessary need for content and marketers and advertisers, small scale and freelance producers were always looking for ways to enhance the quality of their productions. As any film producer or photographer, having a unique perspective of a very commonly shot icon or location is something that would help propel their ability to grow their business and their self-worth. Strap a camera to it was exactly what took place in 2010 and 2011, when remote controlled airplanes and quadcopters became more of an abundance and commodity to everyday consumers and producers. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi technology is continuing to improve. Cellular connectivity with satellites were also greatly improving, and the ability to control these devices with all of the types of technological connections that have been developed and has become a staple in how these drones can be used from a small scale production to a very large scale production. My first drone, the AR drone by Parrot, the quadcopter that you see on the right back in 2010, was my first experience in understanding how this kind of technology can be used to propel my passion of being a video producer. Fast forward over the past 10 years, 2020, and the top 10 drone applications and services that this technology provides: aerial photography, entertainment, law enforcement, wildlife monitoring, weather forecasting, search and rescue missions for law enforcement, precision agricultural assessments, geographic mapping, and providing shipping and delivery services. There are many other types of applications that these UAVs or drones can provide, but over the past 10 years, these remain the top 10. As you can see in these photos in the top left, that is a modern day drone with a high value camera while shooting a TV series. Marketers and real estate agents are using drones to take beautiful photos. Drones also can hold a thermal imager camera, such as what you see inspecting the solar panel farm. And within hours, a drone can provide a more accurate and reliable form of data showing what solar panels may be broken due to hail damage. In the bottom right corner, you see a drone flying over crops, providing protective chemicals, killing bugs and any other harmful things that could damage the crops. Drones are being used in everyday businesses now. There are so many applications that can be performed that help provide a more accurate representation of imagery and data for the end user, for us. White Cloud Drones, my company, over the past 4 years has been doing all of these things in various locations for various consumers. Taking historical data and imagery of construction and development in and around the city, as well as providing video and photo for local news stations and even sports stations who broadcast at the AT&T Center for the San Antonio Spurs. We are a company that can provide all of these things by using this super cool drone technology. In fact, there are over 10,000 drone companies now in America that provide similar services. We also recently sold several drones to police departments and sheriff offices to provide surveillance of certain areas, such as parking lots where people are possibly breaking into people's cars or tracking people down in the middle of a forest. These drones can get into places and areas where it would be extremely expensive to put a helicopter up in the air to do the same kind of task. As you can see in the bottom left corner, with a camera on top of the drone, it will allow people to fly the drone underneath structures such as bridges to inspect specific damage or things that engineers or architects are needing to assess. Agricultural applications, survey mapping, and even shipping and delivery of whatever kind of packages, such as medical supplies or food or much needed assets to people that are clearly living outside of the city. These drones can provide a more accurate and more reliable way of data to the people using this information to better understand how we can provide a growing demand of customer needs. Drone technology is the future. Currently in 2020, battery technology has gotten better, but they aren't as good as where they should be. The demand is higher for battery technology to keep these things in the air longer and safer. The reliability and accuracy of remotely controlling these devices has greatly improved as well, but it's still not perfected. Yes, drones can fly in snow, in heavy winds, and even rain. Some can even swim in the water and then fly. But until the reliability of connectivity and the reliability of battery technology improves, all of these concepts still remain where they are today. What does the future of drones look like? Well, some of you may have heard of machine learning robots, meaning that using the development of AI or artificial intelligence, machines are able to learn based on the environment that they are put in. If these drones are completely autonomous, meaning that they can fly themselves, operate, and function exactly the way we program them to be, we will be able to see drones flying in the air doing multiple tasks and providing different missions for various needs without the need of a human operating them directly. There's already 3 companies that are currently developing manned transport using the same kind of drone technology you see in the common toy drone. Some drones are being developed to provide a skyway of sorts. The skyway would be dedicated airspace for drone transport. Drone transport skyways could include drones that deliver packages or medical supplies or provide communication links for areas that don't have strong cellular or Wi-Fi communications. Drones, much like airplanes from 100 years ago, can virtually have any kind of modern day technology attached to them and provide the practical needs of everyday modern use. What would you attach to a drone and why? Are there a number of people out there that would be willing to pay you to operate these drones or even develop them? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's currently being developed, and over the next few years, as communication technology and battery technology improves, drone technology will greatly be improved. Of course, the military is already decades ahead of us, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of these futuristic ideas be put into action if and when the military calls for them to be used. I'm excited to be a part of this world of drone technology and the many applications they help our society advance more into the 21st century. Again, my name is Adam Dusenbury, and I'm the founder and CEO of White Cloud Drones. And I appreciate your time and interest in the future of this presentation. Thank you.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Sergio Guerra. I'm a special effects makeup artist here in San Antonio, Texas. I want to say thank you very much for being here in this virtual class. With the pandemic, we were all trying to do things a little bit differently. Thanks to the Josiah Film Festival for having me, and I think this is a really cool opportunity for everybody to still do a bunch of really cool stuff, even if we can't all be there in person together. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself before we get started, I've been doing special effects since I was a kid, pretty much. Since I was like 5 years old in kindergarten, I did my first costume contest, and I won, which is kind of a good ego boost to help, make me feel good about what I was doing. So I tried it again the next year and the next year, and I kept winning costume contests, and which was great because I loved Halloween and I love making monsters, and that's really what I wanted to do for a living since then. Little by little, I kind of was able to get involved and do my own makeup. Every time I had a chance to do a haunted house or take my brothers as guinea pigs and make them up or whatever to scare my parents, I would do that. So thankfully all that worked out, and by the time I left high school, I went to college for music education, and halfway through that, I loved music, but I realized I was getting into a lot of like student debt, and I think it's much more important if you're going to go in debt to go in debt for something you're going to want to do or you love to do, And so even though I like music, I decided I would leave the university and I would focus on trying to start my own business revolving around Halloween and special makeup effects. And thankfully I started that off on my own. I worked and did some consulting for Ripley's Haunted Adventure in San Antonio, Texas, when they were just opening. Thankfully, they were very open-minded to like what I could bring to the table, and they let me experiment and do a lot of things within the haunted house that were very successful, which allowed me to do more and more and more and more. So anyways, at 2005, I started The Darkness, which is my own special effects company. Got together with a bunch of really cool people that enjoy making monsters, that enjoy filmmaking, and we just started this for real, And The Darkness has been around, like I said, since 2005 now. We do special effects for film, for TV, for commercials. I do consulting for haunted houses. We do masks and props for the Halloween industry. So a little bit of everything, pretty much. And so with independent film, I work with directors and producers a lot. We've shot our own films and stuff like that, and it's real important that you're able to make things last with independent film. And so you guys might already kind of know that, right? Especially with low budget, you have to kind of give it all you got, and do the best with the materials you've got. So what I wanted to kind of show you guys today was just some basic effects that you can do with materials that you don't have to spend a lot of money on yourself. You can pretty much go and buy any of this stuff like at a Walmart or like some local store near you. You can probably also find a lot of this stuff now on Amazon. A lot of the things that we do here, like I have on my website and stuff. Around Halloween time it gets a little tough because things sell out, but you can always contact me if you like any of this kind of stuff. But anyways, I'm going to show you guys just a couple of different things. Like it's going to be more like narrated because I'm going to show you on my brother again, my guinea pig. He's been gracious enough to allow me to put makeup on his face again, probably for the billionth time. And I'm going to be showing you on them. So as I'm doing that, I will be sort of narrating on top, telling you what it is that I'm doing. But yeah, with no further ado, hopefully let's get started and make some cool stuff. Hi, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to make sort of like a burn on your face that you could use maybe if somebody was again in a car accident or something, or their house burned down. You can kind of use this technique with gelatin to do a lot of different things. You can get really crazy, like burned like Freddy Krueger, or you can do something a little bit more subtle. So we're going to go kind of like in the middle of both of those today, so you can kind of see like what you can do. But definitely feel free to experiment with this. The main material we're using is Knox gelatin. So like it's any kind of sugarless gelatin really that you can get like at the store, Walmart. Not very expensive, so really good to practice with if you want to practice and do a lot of the stuff. But what I'm going to show you today anyways is how to do it in a way where even if you don't have a lot of practice, it could still come out looking pretty good. So anyways, unflavored sugarless gelatin is what we're going to be using today, and you can build it up in layers, and I'll explain more as I'm going along, but you can build it up in layers and keep it thin, whatever it is that the look you're going for calls for. And all you really need for this is just a little, like a small cup, some very, very hot water. So I went ahead and put some water in the microwave right now, so be very careful, don't burn yourself. I'm going to use 2 of these little small cups just to make sure that they stay strong enough when the water's in there. I'm going to fill it up just like about a little less than halfway. Okay, and that's probably going to be about good enough for what we're doing. You can start off like I said, you can do it in layers, so it's better to go in small batches if you're not used to it. We're going to start off with a little bit more than 1.5 of these, and if we need more, we'll just do another batch. So we're going to do that. We're just going to get the little cup of very, very hot water, and then pour the gelatin right into it like that, and we're going to start stirring it. So just using a regular, like, popsicle stick or whatever, and I'm going to stir the contents in, making sure that it gets saturated with water. I know you guys can't really see it in there, but I'll kind of show you as it's coming along. So the big thing you're looking for when you're starting to mix this, and again, the good thing about this material is that it's very inexpensive, so you can experiment a couple of times and it's not going to break your budget. But the thing we're looking for is kind of like a syrupy consistency. Right now with that one package and the amount of water that we put in, if you can see, it's kind of like watery still. And so we want to start a little thicker than that. So I'm going to add the second package. If you get too thick, you feel like it's getting too thick, then you can always add more water. Just whenever you add water to this, make sure that it is very, very hot water. We're going to test this on our skin before we put it on, just to be on the safe side. And you want to do that with your actor as well, so you don't burn them. But yeah, you want to add only hot water, because if you put anything in there that'll cool it, then the sooner this cools, the less workable it's going to be. And so again, I know you guys can't see perfectly in there, but if you can kind of tell like how much thicker this version is now than the original. I'm going to mix it up a little bit more. And so there's two reasons you'll probably notice why working with it a little thicker is better. One is because when we're putting it on the skin, we want it to stay there. If it's too watery, it's just going to keep dripping down. It's not going to stay where you want it. And I'm going to kind of do like a burn, like right here on the side of my face. So we want the first layer to be a little on the thinner side. So we're going to go ahead and try it with this. I'm going to first try it like on the inside of my arm, like just like down here, whatever, just to make sure that it's not going to burn me. If it burns me there, then I definitely don't want it in my face, But it feels okay. If you check that on your actor as well, check on their wrist or something like that, and if they think it's too hot for that, then don't keep going. Let it cool down a little bit more, okay? But you do have a small window of workable time with this stuff. So you can see it's getting a little thicker already. So the more it cools, the thicker it will get. And you can use that to your advantage, as you'll see in a little bit, but just remember that you do have a window, because once it gets too cool, you just can't work with it anymore. So I'm gonna get a little bit, again, less is more at the very beginning because you don't want to burn somebody. So just, even if you already tried it on them, make sure that it's not too hot. Ask them, hey, is that, too hot for you? How does that feel? Because your face, is a little bit different than the skin in your arm, and it may be more sensitive, especially around the eyes. So just, be careful with that, okay? But it feels pretty warm, but it doesn't feel bad, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Now, kind of what I wanna do first is, I don't wanna like smear it on. I wanna sort of like pat it onto where I want it, okay? And in a little bit when it starts cooling more, you'll see more of why. But the very first step sort of is to get it in the area where you're gonna want the burn. So I kind of wanna use the areas in my face and around my beard sort of as a natural edge. Which will help you because the biggest thing about makeup is you want to blend it as best as possible to your face, right, to your skin. So using the natural shapes of your skin and your face will actually to help hide the edges is actually a good thing. So one of the reasons again that we're sort of patting it on, and you might already be able to tell a little bit, I don't know if you can or not, maybe there, is that you end up getting these little kind of ridges, these little high points and low points. And when we're doing this kind of burn, that's sort of what we're looking for. We want a couple of high points. We're going to be able to almost sculpt this in a little bit. So we've already got sort of the edge pressed down, like it's already pretty thin. So now I'm going to stay within the amount of gelatin that I put on the first time, and I'm going to start adding it to the inside of that. Just make sure you go around the edge. If you do see something kind of too thick, try and put some more gelatin on there so that you can hide it a little bit better. If it's too thick at the very edge, you'll definitely be able to tell what's going on. So you might already be able to tell also as it cools, you get like these little stringy bits, and that's sort of what we want. We want to be able to shape this on our face, and so as it cools, and if you keep patting it like this, you'll naturally create those little ridges. You can also literally sculpt it with your tool, so it's a little bit more of what you want, and then you can continue to add more to create more thickness. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into my sideburn here. The good thing about gelatin is that as long as you heat it back up, it'll, before it's totally dry, it will come off. And so you could put this in somebody's hair, like on their hair, like if you wanted them to be like fully burnt, like right here, Obviously, it's better to prepare the area a little bit more, but I mean, if it's something like an eyebrow or a sideburn or something like this, you can literally put this right over, and when you put the color over it, you'll kind of it'll kind of look like even the hair burned off. So it's got to be thick enough, so you got to make sure you put enough in there. And we'll come back to that area in a little bit. Right now I'm just trying to get a little bit more of this on the side of my temple here, because the burn maybe went up a little bit higher. Just be very careful when you're working these areas. Anytime there's a possibility for something to drip into your eye or your actor's eye, just be careful and make sure that you're not putting too much. It's better to go slower, a little bit at a time, and then possibly drip it into their eyeball. And so again, once it starts kind of cooling, we want to sort of use these little like tendrils and the stickiness of it to kind of pull it up on itself and create these like really weird textures. That's sort of what's going to make it look more organic, more realistic. And so it's really what we want. And again, it might be hard to tell right now because it's a little bit on the translucent side, and you can always go back in and just kind of place a little bit more in thickness where you want thicker areas. But as it's cooling, like I said, just make sure that you tap it so that you can get those little sort of tendrils and use them for your own benefit. See, I don't know if you guys can see how that's sort of working out there, And once the makeup's on there, that will make it look very, very realistic. Again, there might be parts where you want to kind of like push and pull with your actual stick here. Little bits of gelatin that kind of came off, or maybe parts that didn't totally mix. You might be able to see them right now, but they're going to be covered with makeup, so don't worry about it too much. And right now all we're doing really is just waiting for this to dry up a bit more, and so that as it cools we can get a little bit more of this organic texture on top. Just again, be careful with your eyeballs, okay? And you can kind of leave it as a more realistic burn. So really cool to use this gelatin stuff because you can get some really nice textures without having to sculpt a prosthetic or anything like that, and you can get really, really nice looks. So right now when this finishes drying a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next step, okay? Take this little guy off. There we go. Okay, So now we're back. It's a little bit drier. Once this dries enough, then it won't be as sticky anymore, which is kind of how you could tell when it's dry enough. But something we're going to do just in case, so if you're going to use this kind of effect for like a film that you're doing or something, and you want it to last a long time, the gelatin will eventually lose more and more of the water content in it, which means that it's going to become a little brittle and it'll stop being as elastic. So to kind of prevent that and kind of allow for your actor to wear this throughout the day without it falling apart, I would use some liquid latex, which is the kind of latex you find like around the Halloween stores and stuff like that. Just get a little bit on a brush or on a little makeup sponge, something that's throwawayable, because if not, then you'll probably lose it. And sort of like apply a thin layer over this. You can kind of just like plop down something in the middle and then sort of work it around towards the edges. Now this is good because it's going to make the makeup like blend a little bit better. If you're using like cream makeup or something like that, sometimes it doesn't want to stick really well to the gelatin itself. So to the latex, it'll stick a little bit better. And then also, like I said, it'll sort of seal it, and so there you don't have to worry about it drying out on you too much, So the gelatin you can get in people's hairs. Try not to get latex in people's hairs. It's a lot harder to remove. The areas here where I put gelatin over the hair, though, then that's fine, because I'm really only putting latex over the gelatin that's already on the hair. And like I mentioned earlier, that part will be easy to remove because the gelatin essentially will sort of like melt off with hot water. So once you're done with shooting, you can literally help your actor or tell your actor to get in the shower or get some hot water, some hot napkins, drenched in water if you want, to just heat this back up, and it should melt almost perfectly off. It's a little sticky, gross, but again, not having to sculpt prosthetics or anything like that, this can give you a very cool look very quickly without much experience, and that's actually kind of what we're going for here, So inexpensive way to get something that could be looked at like high quality. Now, as far as the latex that I'm putting on here, it's better to go in thin layers, one after the other, than trying to get, just glob it on completely, because again, the whole point is that we're trying to seal this gelatin so we can paint over it, and with the latex, it's really only going to dry out if it's thin layers. If you glob it on, it's sort of like Elmer's glue, where sometimes the outside of the Elmer's glue dries and it forms up like a bubble, and the inside stays like wet, and that's kind of what latex is like. So you want to avoid that so that you don't end up with some areas that will just eventually pop when you're putting the makeup on and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so just cover all the areas that you had the gelatin on, pretty much. Thin layers that'll hold the makeup, and then that's it. You're pretty much done with that. And once that dries, then we can begin to apply makeup on top. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that there until it dries a little bit more. Okay, cool. So it's drying out already, the latex. Again, when you could touch it and it sort of like feels matte, where it's not sticky to your fingers, then it's pretty much dry. Latex will dry a little clearer, so you can kind of tell like around the nose area where that's clearer than everything else. The thicker areas will kind of keep a color for a while. But this is good enough to sort of get the process started. You could wait for it to completely dry and be almost completely see-through, but it's not necessary. So you can use cream-based makeup or grease-based makeup on top of this, like around Halloween stores, the stuff you find, there. So it can take anything. I'm going to use alcohol-based paints today, just because that's what I have. It's Skin Illustrator FX palette and couple of other ones, just like basic colors and stuff, but the thing to remember is that depending on what your final look is, that's how you want to paint it. So if you wanted somebody that has sort of a scarified tissue from a burn from a long time ago, you could do something like this and then paint it with more like flesh colors, so a couple of dark pockets. It's the same process I'm going to show you right now, but the colors would be slightly different. We're going for a little bit more like trauma on the face, like maybe this is pretty recent. So it's going to be a little bit more gory, or you can go full Freddy Krueger, like I said, and really build up some of these ridges, because the more layers you put on this, those little ridges get higher and higher. So you can build a lot more of those. You can literally cut into it, so I can like cut holes into this right now, and then you have deeper recessed areas, so it's good for like a zombie or something like that. Really, you can play around with it a lot, but if you wanted it super gory, where it's all like super bloody and stuff like that, you can do that as well. We just won't go that far today, So again, you can use any kind of makeup. If you do use grease makeup, make sure you powder it. You just put some powder over it to make sure that it doesn't this doesn't smear off. For alcohol-based paints, these are kind of expensive. So again, if you're just starting to like practice, they're not necessary. But for alcohol-based paints, you need 99% alcohol, and that's this stuff right here. 99% alcohol, 97 won't work, 98 won't work. It's got to be 99% alcohol. So again, a little harder to find, but you can find it if you have some of these. But it's not necessary. I just use it because it's simple, and I already got the stuff right here for it. So I'm going to start off with a kind of like a thin sort of pink color. And that's just to kind of give the underlying area of the burn, something like uniform, so it's not white, and then all the other colors can go on top of that. Now, again, you could tell even right now as we're talking, like the latex continues to dry a little bit more. As long as it's not like sticky or falling off on your fingers, then it should be good enough for you to put paint on it. But if you so if you do start putting paint on it and you start seeing some of the latex is like coming off with it, then just hold off a little longer. Give it a couple more minutes. I think for what we're doing, this will be good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm really just going to get as much coverage as I can on this. I'm not trying to make it like perfect. I just want to get the color in as many of the areas as possible. Now, again, I'm not putting a lot of attention on like exactly where the color is, because we're going to do that sort of like in layers and washes. I'm just trying to get like an even coverage sort of. But even then, like, even isn't necessary. The more uneven and the more like unnatural this looks, the better your makeup's going to look at the end. So try and avoid everything looking too perfect. In other words, too uniform. If I was, wanting to make sure that this had the same shade of pink in every little nook and cranny in here, you might think, okay, well now if everything's that one flat color, that's great. But in real life, your skin isn't like that. And well, most things aren't like that. So if you can sort of start off already here at the base layer with just kind of getting, sort of blotches of makeup on, that'll look a lot more realistic in the end. And that's sort of what we're going to do with all these colors. So, might as well start it from the base layer, And again, I'm just kind of covering every area here. Now the part that I covered there with gelatin on my hair, you can kind of see it's taking up that color pretty good, and that's what I meant. Like you could literally have somebody burn off half their head and just use gelatin there, because the end result will look like if they just burnt that part off. It's kind of a pain to get rid of it afterwards. Like I said, a lot of hot water and soap, but sometimes again, for the economics of it and the final look of it without having to prep too much, it's kind of a good trade-off. So, but I'll leave that for your actors to decide if they think it's a good trade-off. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. For this one, like I said, I want to get in a little bit more on the deep parts to just kind of bring those out. So, I'm going to put a little bit of color in there. Again, try not to be like too perfect with it. Just kind of, placing little droplets into all these little deep areas that the gelatin sort of created, And again, you can get really, really Freddy Krueger with all this kind of stuff, but just a little bit of this gives the illusion of more depth, and it really makes those little pockets like stand out. So you don't have to go too crazy with it, but if you wanted to, you definitely could. Also, you can take a lot of time if you wanted to with this kind of with this step, because there's a lot of little organic like details, like I said, that the gelatin sort of like adds, and so you can follow each one. You can make new ones into there, just kind of like it's almost like paint by numbers, done for you already, because you sort of did the work with the gelatin instead of having to sculpt something out from the get-go, So for this, I just want to make sure there's some areas that definitely look like deeper, like this was a bad burn, don't want it to look like like too innocent. I want to look like, man, this is a bad something bad happened to this guy, So the deeper recesses definitely we want to make sure they pop out. And then in a little bit we can go over, and again you can sort of stop at almost any level depending on where you want, but you can actually add more and add blood and stuff like that, add some highlights. So I'm going to do a little bit of that with a fleshier color. You can get in with a tinier, like, little brush and do even smaller details. I am going to put a little bit of red around my eye. just a little bit there because it'll look a little bit weird if it's just perfectly normal there. So just around that section, I'm going to get another little one of these. Actually, get a little brush so I can control it better. And I'm just going to add a little bit of red here. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with a sort of fleshier color. Just slightly over the high points, and that's just to give it a little bit of a highlight, you know. So on any of these parts that are just really lightly with your brush, just kind of brush downward, and you'll see it sort of picks up those highlights there, you know, like naturally. So you have to do less work. And again, on something like this, you kind of want that because you're not going to be able to beat out nature, you know. So these kind of like organic looking shapes and all that will take you quite a while to try and sculpt, but here you're getting to take the advantage of having made those shapes with the gelatin, and it's just sort of picking them out. Okay. So again, we can get in some areas really deep. I'll probably do that maybe on just like 2 of them, I think. Some really deep like red blood color, and you know, there's just, again, to make sure it looks like this is fairly fresh, not, you know, not super old, so this person's probably still in a lot of pain. And then, just to kind of tie it all together, I'm going to splatter a little bit of red all over it, and that will just kind of like I said, sort of marry it all together here. So sometimes, I think I'm going to do it right now too, but I'm going to wait till I put the red on. It's good to add a little bit of yellow on something like this, because then it'll really make those things pop, and it'll sort of make it look like some of the skin might be, you know, beginning to become infected or something. But okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit of red just around everywhere, like kind of like splatter it on with a very thin version of the makeup. Just thin it out using more alcohol, and I'm gonna put it all over. Okay, just be very careful when you're doing this, because it is 99% alcohol, and so you don't want it to get into people's eyeballs, if possible. So again, this is just a little bit more to kind of marry things together. Because your skin is like a bunch of little dots, different colored dots, you know? It's not just one solid thing, so we kind of want to give that impression here. Now, since I already went ahead and did that, I'm going to do a little bit of the yellow that I was telling you guys about. And just, it's very little, so we don't want it to like overwhelm like all the others. But with the reds in there and stuff like that, this will kind of like pop out a little bit more. So some of these like dots here, or some of these little areas, can probably use a little bit. And we'll just sort of make it look a little bit more like possibly infected or something, you know. But less is more. Again, if you overdo it, it's harder to kind of tone it down. But if you don't put enough, you can always add a little bit more here and there, you know. So hopefully you guys can see the little difference that makes. It's not crazy, just enough to, again, give it a little bit more dimensionality to the actual burn. Because again, you don't want to just paint one full color on here and then, you know, call it done. Your skin would actually have a bunch of different colors. And if this is a really bad burn, I mean, actually this would probably fall in line with that too. I'll kind of show you. So you can get a little bit of like black makeup, just like regular grease makeup, like that one, right? I'm gonna put a little bit on here. And if you wanted to, like on the edges, you can get any kind of sponge. This is a stipple sponge, it works pretty good. I'm just gonna get a little bit of that black, and then you can kind of like put it in some of the like higher points of the burn, and it'll really make it look like, you know, like some areas were just charred. So if you wanted to go that far with your burn, you could do that. Again, all of this stuff could be less. You could start out, I mean, you could do a lot less on this if you wanted to, but you know, just to really get that, you know, this person was in a bad type of fire or something look, you can add a little bit sort of like this charcoal black to some of the high points and drive that point home, I guess, you know. I hope this helped you out. Like I said, you can use this in combination with any other things that we learned to make a lot of different things. Just as I'm talking, I'm gonna probably get a little bit of blood and stuff just for fun. But yeah, you can mix up a lot of these same techniques that we used in these classes and just see what works best. Some of the blood here will just help, again, keep some of these areas shiny. So especially when you go in with a black, you can make some of these areas very bloody. So like if I just got out of a burning car, I would have like the ashiness maybe of the black, but at the same time I would probably have my skin underneath that is that has just been burned off, pretty traumatized, and so there would be blood there around my eyes and things like that. So anyways, have fun with it, play around. I know it's almost Halloween, so hopefully y'all can use some of this stuff at least for that, and maybe in the future for some of your own films. And if you have any questions ever, feel free to look me up online, and I try and answer as many questions as I can. So look me up, ask me questions, come back here again, and yeah, thank you all for having me. Hopefully you guys have a good Halloween and great movie making.
Next week's workshop will feature Erica Missy, a local animator with great Hollywood credits, and now a fantastic local musician. She's going to VJ us through the best animation projects from the Josiah Festival 2006 through 2019. So thank y'all very much for tuning in and enjoy the program.